DEI, what is it? Well, that is the million-dollar question. It depends on who you talk to, because unfortunately, this issue has become politicized. And it should have never been politicized, because who doesn't want us to be diverse? But unfortunately, it has become an issue that the people who are left of the aisle seem to support, and then the people on the right have decided to speak out against. But what does it really do in the professional community? What does it do to the military? What does it do in academia? And today we're going to talk about what it did to Rick Addante. Rick, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. I watched your broadcast with James O'Keefe, who is a very well-known whistleblower and someone who celebrates whistleblowers. And I was so impressed by your interview that I knew I wanted to have you on. And I also knew that I wanted to bring the DEI issue to the Stories of Service podcast. We've had a lot of discussions on LinkedIn about DEI, and now we're really going to get into why I have evolved to think that the DEI mindset or policies are actually harmful, and not only harmful to the military, but harmful in any democracy. So with that, welcome to the Stories of Service podcast. Ordinary people do extraordinary work, and I'm the host of Stories of Service, Teresa Carpenter. And as we always do to get these shows started, you will hear an introduction from my father, Charlie Pickard.
From the moment we're born and lock eyes with our parents, we are inspiring others. By showing up as a vessel of service, we not only help others, we help ourselves. Welcome to S.O.S, Stories of Service, hosted by Teresa Carpenter. Hear from ordinary people from all walks of life who have transformed their communities by performing extraordinary work.
And Dr. Adante has earned a PhD in neuroscience at UC Davis as a pre-doctoral fellow of the American Psychological Association, then completed a postdoctoral fellowship in neuroimaging with the University of Texas at Dallas. He was a recipient of the National Research Service Award from NIH and a fellow of the Psychonomics Society, in addition to serving as an associate editor of several academic journals and an aircrew pilot in the United States Air Force Auxiliary. As a cognitive neuroscience, his research work discovered a new kind of human memory and found that memory is predicted by prior brain activity. He has also been a mission specialist at the NASA HERA mission and a principal investigator of NASA missions investigating astronaut cognition. He's been recognized with the Young Alum Award of UC Davis, Faculty Mentor Award from Cal State University, and featured on major news networks such as NPR, in addition to being honored with the Citizen Journalism Foundation's Award for Courage at Mar-a-Lago. And this is what we're going to talk about tonight after revealing $76 million in fraud upon the federal government by universities. And after 25 years in academia and serving as a tenured professor of psychology at Florida Tech. He now serves on the board of advisors for STARS, which is a wonderful organization, stand together against racism and radicalism in the services, and is a founder and CEO of Space Psychology, LLC, and Neurocog Analytics. How you doing again, Rick?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the kind introduction.
Absolutely. So I always start off these podcasts with everyone with where were you born and raised, and what got you down the path of your first career?
Sure. So first, I'll apologize if my screen is slow. I see it's slow on my side. So if there's any sort of technical glitches, just let me know.
I will. We can hear you just fine. And it is a little bit of slow from the motion standpoint, but I think we can see you and we can hear you. And I think that's what's most important.
All right. Terrific. So I was born outside of Chicago, Illinois, in a suburb out there, and raised there for about 16 years. Had kind of a pretty tumultuous childhood, handful of different challenges growing up. And it got to the point to where when I was 16, I basically left home and effectively had to run away to basically escape a pretty abusive home at the time from my dad. My mom had left about 6 years earlier. I hadn't been allowed to see or talk to her at that time. And we had been raised up until that point by her as a single mom in Chicago area's public housing. And then she decided to start a new family and dropped us off at our dad's business and went to a different state. And so at 16, I left my dad's, which wasn't the best place for us at that time, and basically set out and found her in New Jersey and started over again. Within about a year or two, I was captain of the wrestling team. Dean's List, was a recruit at Princeton University for their wrestling team. Ended up wrestling for 4 years at the College of New Jersey, about 15 minutes down the road from Princeton. I was a 4-year letterman, ended up winning the award for the top psychology student in the university, won the John Wayne Dishon Award for truth, courage, integrity that they give to one student in the college. Went to graduate school, was a head coach of a high school wrestling team in between. And so a little bit of New Jersey, Chicago kind of blend.
But how did you find all this success when everything was so tumultuous? And you didn't even mention it. You mentioned it on the James O'Keefe show. I mean, you also went to court and had to testify and you basically were a whistleblower at the age of 12. And I'm fascinated how you went down such a good path early on.
Well, I wasn't on such a good path early on. I was getting in some trouble too, but because that was really difficult. But I was the oldest of what it turns out to be 7 kids. I didn't know about all of them at the time, and some of them came a little bit later, but I was always kind of at a very early age, I was thrust in sort of into a role of a parental child. So I had a lot of responsibilities that were either put on me or that I kind of chose to take in looking out for my younger siblings and protecting them from some of the abuses that we were subjected to for basically going back to about 7 years old. And so, that was something that, I alluded to it on the O'Keefe show and then again on David Rutherford's show. But like when you learn right and wrong at such a young age, the hard way, by which I mean, you learn what's right and wrong because you're the one who's suffering because other people are doing the wrong thing. Well, you're begging them to do the right thing. And I mean, people all throughout systems, judges, guardians ad litem, child reps, attorneys, parents. I mean, I learned when you see what happens when good men do nothing or when bad men do something and good men, it's a crystallizing experience, or at least it was for me. And so that, that dovetailed with, a lot of traumatic events, I would say that was happening during that period. As I switched between, different parents' houses, different years in my life, neither of whom were particularly great for us at the time. But, I try to look back now as a father myself, almost twice the age as they were when they had me. And I try to give a little bit of grace in retrospect, but it really wasn't a very good situation. And so I think that prepared me to understand a clearer compass for ambiguity than many people get to kind of clarify during their youth. And, my mom had done a great job in kind of helping me to see in development what's right and wrong and the importance of doing it and developing and kind of coaching that courage at different times, to where, at later points in life, I had to testify to help my younger siblings in court from having the same kind of situations imposed on them that was, pretty negatively imposed on me. And that was gratifying, but it wasn't an intentional pathway. That was something that I actually kind of built my career to avoid. I could have gone down the road of being a lawyer or, a law enforcement or something along those lines. I was a psychologist, a neuroscientist instead, something that I thought would have no real overlap towards that application. But the way it ended up shaking out was, God's hand in providence, has you kind of operate as the instrument of his will. And it brought me back to that situation where I was able to actually help by virtue of simply telling the truth. And
Right. Right. So you are, just so you know, we talked about it earlier from a technical standpoint. You are a little bit, you can see kind of like you're skipping a little bit. I don't know if that's the connection on your end or if there's anything you can do. If you can't, don't worry about it. One thing that some of my guests do, and we always work these issues out on live, and my audience is very patient with me about it, is you can try calling back on a phone, or if not, we can just power through it. I can hear you just fine, which tells me my audience can hear you just fine, but there is just a slight delay, like you said.
I'm happy to try calling back in a second. Maybe that'll reset it, but
okay. Why don't we just try that, and then I'll go full screen, and we'll just pick this up in here in just 1 second.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll be right back.
Awesome. And thanks, guys, for your patience. Sometimes that does happen. We have people who come in, they come in really, really clear at the beginning of the call. And then as we go through the call on the live chat, we'll see that they need to just reset, and we go ahead and give them a chance to do that, which I've always appreciated, that the ability to do that. So let's try this again. Here we go. Let me see if I can get them back in. Give me 1 second, everyone. All right. You there, Rick?
Yes, I am.
All right. I think you're kind of still the same, which is fine. Like I said, the audience can hear you just fine. I can hear you. We already have a few people who are joining us live. So let's just continue on. So okay. We're picking up to where you were in college, and you wrestled, you went to Princeton, and then where do you go next?
Well, I ended up being the head coach of a high school wrestling team for a year. I founded that basically my 5th year in college. I thought I was going to take a redshirt year from an injury, but I ended up wrestling through, and then had no coaching opportunity open locally there, whereby I didn't think I would actually be good at it. Like I was a very mediocre walk-on Division III wrestler, and so I didn't think I'd have much to offer in terms of coaching. And when it was offered to me, it happened to be the day that one of my coaches from high school had died, and in a really tragic case of suicide, and kind of shook a lot of us in that community a lot. And I kind of felt like the job being offered to me was an opportunity for me to continue his legacy and kind of keep coaching and passing that knowledge on in a good way amid that tragedy, and almost sort of providential, because I wasn't really suited for the coaching thing. I hadn't thought about it too well, and I didn't think I was good for it. So ended up doing it. Ended up being amazing. Our kids would win tournaments and had a blast and do really, really good. So yeah, did that for a little bit, and then got a full ride to graduate school at UC Davis, and decided to pursue that for neuroscience, and started doing that. Went out there and got on the triathlon team, started rehabbing some injuries, and kind of went that pathway, which I'm happy to unpack more. There's a whole, stories about graduate school and whatnot, but long story short, it worked out, and they didn't kick me out. I didn't have to leave. I made some really cool discoveries and got my pilot's license, learned how to do some really cool scientific diving, and really built the professional tools for public speaking, for scientific analysis, critical thinking, teaching, grant writing, that, paved the way, as you hope it would, from a graduate training for a successful career.
So I have some images here. So this image here, I'll show it to the screen. Was this while you were there, or is this later on in your career? Is this more of the NASA stuff that we'll talk about?
That was a little bit later in the career. So that's the NASA NEEMO mission, which stands for NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations. And so that was about 10 years after I graduated. I had an opportunity to be the principal investigator of these astronauts living and working underwater in that capacity for saturation diving, for a simulation of space travel. Actually, the world's closest simulation for spaceflight, because it includes real active danger, risk, and pressure. such as, living and diving in dangerous environments and living in confined environments as well inside the capsule. And that was a real honor and a blessing to have been a part of. An absolutely fantastic team. And but it drew upon the training in diving that I had been able to learn while in graduate school at UC Davis, and integrated that with the crew operations perspective that I had from working on the Human Exploration Research Analog, or the HERA mission, where I was a crew member at a NASA Johnson Space Center. We lived in a capsule for a 45-day isolation and confinement study to understand the psychological elements of getting to Mars, coming home. How are we going to optimize team dynamics, minimize threats to crew cohesion, teamwork, psychology, all that kind of stuff. And fast forward about another 5 or 6 years after that, when I was here at Florida Tech, one of the real honors in my academic career was having my students end up getting selected for that mission too. So that was very special. Anderson Wilder did a fantastic job, and that was a real special thing, because I think we're the only professor and student combination to have ever been selected.
Is this part of that where you did some of that kind of work here?
Yeah, that's at the NASA Human Exploration Research Analog. That's actually Building 9 at NASA Johnson Space Center. What you're looking at there on the photos left is a real life mock-up of the International Space Station, and all the patches of the different missions that have been on there. That was my team of researchers that I had brought there from my laboratory to test the astronauts going into the NEEMO mission. And so that was, again, one of the highlights in my career as a teacher was training my students up to where they do exactly what you hope to do as a teacher, which is to walk away and let them drive the car or fly the airplane. And I trained them up. We worked real hard for about a year. And then I brought them there, and it was their job to test the astronauts. And I just sat back.
That's so cool.
A little bit prayerfully, just like any parent when you give them the keys to the car or the keys to the airplane, right? You're still kind of like paying pretty close attention, but I really had a lot of confidence and trust in them, or I wouldn't have allowed them to do that in such, delicate situations where we were testing several astronauts, both from the European Space Agency, Samantha Cristoforetti, who's a famous astronaut. She actually has a Barbie doll of herself that's out there. Jessica, of course, Watkins, and a handful of other crew members. This is a pretty special opportunity. I was really proud of the team there. That's Constance, Alana, and Rachel. They did absolutely fantastic.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And that's what's so neat about your career, is that you started off in academia, then you went to NASA, then you went to Florida Tech. So you had this very, I would say, eclectic, and people say that about me too, because I went from fixing airplanes to being a surface warfare officer to being a PAO. So you've done sort of the same thing. You sort of jumped around in different positions. Why did you leave NASA to go to Florida Tech?
Well, that's a good question. So as it were, I don't know that I would say that I actually left NASA for that, but my time at NASA was kind of passing. So they actually took me from academia in order to serve on the mission for the HERA mission. And then once that mission completed, it was actually able to go back to my job at the university. And when I did the NEEMO mission, I was actually still working at the university by virtue of basically getting to deploy our research into the NASA mission. So in some respects, I never really left academia until they fired me not too long ago, this past summer. But I'm sure we'll get to that in a little bit. But it was a really nice symbiotic relationship that NASA has with the university system. And that was one of the features when I went to go do that isolation and confinement study. It worked out really well because it matched with the academic calendar. So I didn't have to leave the university at all. That stemmed basically from, originally I was interviewing for the space program for the astronaut job. I was, I think, the first group of 10 in the 2017 class that interviewed out of 18,350. Came close, no cigar. That kind of parlayed into the HERA mission. The HERA mission kind of parlayed into the NEEMO mission. But ultimately, it was all kind of like piggybacking onto the position that I was holding at the time in academia, working in the universities. And that kind of led to Florida Tech, because after I did the HERA mission and the NEEMO mission, that was through Cal State San Bernardino. You know, I was pretty passionate about aerospace and psychology and neuroscience and the ways to integrate them. And I had a lot of really good ideas of technology integrations and research that can be done. And Cal State San Bernardino just wasn't well suited for that. Whereas Florida Tech at the time had a flight school, had a psychology department, engineering departments. I ended up becoming an affiliate in the biomedical engineering department there. So like it was just a better suited way that was also nestled right down the road here from Kennedy Space Center. So it just made a lot of sense to kind of like grow in that direction and kind of, you know, bridge out from really what wasn't going to be available in San Bernardino. If you've ever been there, it's a beautiful area, but it's also kind of like the murder capital of California. So not the best place for like aerospace integrations with operational neuroscience and psychology to kind of thrive. So
you're in this scientific world, and I think James asked a similar question, but this is what's really so fascinating to me, where merit is everything. And did you know early on in your academic career that this whole DEI thing was becoming what it was? Like, did you understand the Marxism roots of it? Because you're a researcher and you're a scientist, so I would think that you probably knew something about it, but what was your experience with it leading up to what happened at Florida Tech?
That's a great question. I mean, I think at times I probably noticed, and other times I didn't. You know, I would note probably a couple like salient shifts that kind of happened. So DEI was kind of a modern manifestation of what became known as diversity, which kind of followed on the heels of affirmative action. And so they kind of meant different things at different times. And so I think there was a gradual morphing, and then as the saying goes, it's like slowly and then all at once. And so what I observed over time was that there seemed to be this mission creep, as they say, where something that went primarily towards like what I thought was a pretty positive goal of like, you know, ensuring that people aren't discriminated against became the tool by which discrimination was actually happening. And that's a really different thing. You know, when you're trying to protect all people from being discriminated against, I think that's a noble cause. But when you're kind of using a policy to advocate for some groups of people and not for others, you know, you get in some troubling waters that, you know, we've been informed by places like the Supreme Court, the Department of Justice's Office of Civil Rights, you know, that's not just illegal, but it's immoral, it's unjust, and it's un-American, because, you know, we need to be treating American citizens as our brothers and sisters, our community members. And that means not discriminating against anyone based on any protected class, and making sure that we put the best people in the best places so that our culture thrives. And that decision of, you know, selecting people or opportunities or grants or projects or however that manifests, that's being done in a way that's not discriminatory, that's not illegal effectively.
Right.
And so I was a diversity fellow, as it turned out. During my pre-doctoral training, I was a diversity fellow of the American Psychological Association while I was at UC Davis. Won a National Research Service Award in that capacity from the National Institute of Mental Health. But like, I think it's confused at times by a lot of people who may mistake that, you know, diversity is not DEI. DEI is 3 different words abbreviated into 3 different letters. Diversity is only one of those. But when you start talking about the equity and making sure that, you know, you push any particular group of people forward while holding another set of people back, which is oftentimes the stated intent of such policies, if not the incidental consequence and outcome of how it's implemented, then I think it really transitions from trying to help and protect people to having the effect of actually hurting people. And it hurts all people involved. So if, like I said, I was a diversity fellow. And so one of the things that, you know, people don't always think about, but like, you never know are you getting a particular opportunity or a job because they they wanted to hold it out for me because I was a diversity fellow or something like that. And that doesn't always have the best psychological impact on a person who really ought to feel comfortable that they earned a position on merit, rather than were given it a position or an opportunity for a reason other than their deserving merit. You end up things with imposter syndrome. You end up things with, inferiority complexes or other things that's not fair to all the people involved. It's not fair to, make people wonder, why was it that I was selected for X, Y, or Z? The answer should always be, it's because you're excellent for the position and a great fit, and no other reason, but you're the best fit for the job.
Absolutely. And I think that what has happened in what I see in the landscape is that there are a lot of well-intentioned people who believe in DEI because they believe that it still is what we thought diversity was. Like you, I was a part of any diversity committee I could get on at any workplace I was on. I was like, this is great. This is inclusive. As someone who doesn't always fit in every group, I loved the idea that there would be these committees that were committed to including everyone. And that's what I thought DEI was for the longest time. But it wasn't until I saw that it, like you said, started to lead to, we're only choosing these people because of a particular protected class. And like you said, it doesn't just hurt the people that didn't get the job or didn't get the opportunity because they weren't in that class. It hurts the other people too, because then they have to, like you say, have to wonder if they got it because of the fact that they were a member of that group. So take me back. I don't know why I'm blinking a little bit here. Hold on a second. I'm just going to put you on full screen while my camera decides to have a little bit of a misstep. But take me back a little bit to what happened initially at Florida Tech. Like, what was sort of the backdrop that happened as you got into that position and started seeing the impacts of DEI?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, we talked about how, my intention in moving there and growing my career was because of the obvious integration in aerospace and biomedical engineering with the space program and my work in psychology and neuroscience. I think within by about the first year there, I was asked to build the world's first college degree program in space psychology, and I was excited to start building that. And then the wheels started coming off because I found out that they had lied to me about a handful of things. It turns out when they recruited me, they told me that they would be connecting me up with Buzz Aldrin. They have an Aldrin Space Institute there that we'd be collaborating on these programs. So I'm like, I get there, I'm like, yeah, okay, let's get to work. And they're like, well, actually, don't call him. He's suing us. Well, okay, well, why is he suing you? Well, it turns out we're using his name and he doesn't want us to. And so like there was a big bait and switch. And then they tried to, there were some. As it turns out, the dean who hired me was the dean who called the meeting that the O'Keefe meeting famously ended up having an expose of, in trying to hide this DEI to cover up their defrauding of the federal and state governments on these new DEI executive orders. And, as time moved on, trying to answer your question in terms of what happened there, but also in respect to the development of DEI sort of over time in academia, like I saw it becoming something that people were using as a cudgel, not to help people, but to hurt people too, to advocate and push one group over another in ways that then, as you fast forwarded, now we've seen actually the findings from the Supreme Court. They said you can't do that. We've seen the rulings from the Office of Civil Rights, from the Department of Justice. They say that's illegal, that's discriminatory, because it is. Now, I wasn't always thinking about it in that way because, like you said, I think a lot of people grew up, just wanting to make sure that we treat everybody fairly, and who I hope everybody still wants to do that. I certainly do. And if you look at my track record, it's like I said, I was a diversity fellow myself. I grew up in public housing in Chicago and earned my PhD in, as a diversity fellow. And then I worked for like 4 or 5 years at like San Bernardino as a Hispanic serving institution. Everyone I trained and completely committed my efforts to were what people would think about was as, say, diversity students or whatever, but it's not how I thought about it. That's not how, for a long time, we didn't really think about these things. You treat people like human beings, and I didn't really have to see the world through the lens of the way that those policies kind of forced people to see the world through, which was the lens of race or the protected classes and this and that. And you started to see this development of, this Marxist ideology, this critical race theory, this intersectionality theories that is really pretty harmful. It's pretty anti-American because it really juxtaposes, some sort of imaginary power structure in perpetuity, holding some people back that then has to be theoretically overcome by an intentional handicapping of other people so that other people can, in theory, catch up to achieve this equity sort of that the word alludes to. And so, it's a really interesting sort of academic exercise to think about that equity facet, because it was a very new development in culture, law, society that hadn't been around for a while. And, I'm a neuroscientist, so I haven't always thought about those things, but like, equality in nature is very rarely like something that's good. You can't have equal sun and equal moon all day. Like the plants need sunlight, and other times they need moonlight or water, right? Like you don't have equal balances when you think of like cellular bases of like an action potential of resting membrane potential, ionic balances. Like very basic fundamental life sustaining things are critically dependent upon non-equality, like non-equity of certain things that allow our cells to fire and keep us alive. So like there's this, I think, a flawed fundamental premise that there's something inherently good about everybody having equity of outcome. Because you can't, I don't run as fast as Usain Bolt, and I can't dunk a basketball as high as Michael Jordan can. And that's okay. Like, so what? So, I think that became kind of like hijacked by, unfortunately for political reasons. And it was used as a cudgel to hold other people back and advance other people. And culture suffers from that. When that
I agree. And I also think that it's now in place in order to control the masses. And I think that has shown itself to be clear, because if you think that you're oppressed and you think that you are needing, there's that camera again. Here we go. If you think that you are needing some sort of protection from the government or protection from the government, like you need to go to them and say, I'm a protected class. People discriminated against me because I'm X, Y, and Z. Well, then now you're in this situation where you're not being dependent on your own. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not coming from you to try to fix your own problems. And I don't think I understood that fully until I looked at it from the lens of oppressor and oppressed, and then who benefits by you feeling oppressed. Because if you feel oppressed, then you're a victim and you're not able to rise above that circumstance.
Yeah, although I would add, from my point of view, maybe some nuance of like, I think, almost one of the sole reasons of the existence of government is to make sure we are protected from becoming victims or compensated if we are. That kind of keeps us away from like might is right and just the biggest, most powerful mafia leaders like bullying us, right? Like
Sure.
We should make sure that we have protections in place from our rights being, violated or taken away. But, I mentioned that in the respect of, like what happens when these things go awry as policies, even if intended from a good place. I'll give you an example. So I was teaching classes, and I was teaching the Tuskegee Institute's horrifying story of the 1930s. The National Institute of Health's predecessor secretly injected a bunch of sharecropper black men in Alabama with syphilis on purpose, and didn't tell them that it was syphilis they were injecting them with. They lied to them, and they just wanted to see, essentially an experiment of what would happen to them. And they even continued the experiment, even though the men were horribly afflicted. And there was, over time, longitudinally, a cure developed, penicillin. They didn't tell them that. They didn't, and they let these men be victims for decades without even telling them about it. It was an absolute. So I mentioned that because if people aren't familiar with that study, it's an extraordinarily famous one. It's in every textbook. It's in every ethics training. It helped form the basis for things like informed consent and all these standard ethical frameworks that we have in science, biomedical science, medicine, all these kind of things. And so anyways, so I'm teaching a class on research methods, and I'm teaching that story. It's in every, because it's literally in the book. I'm teaching. Sure. And I get comments from students aghast that I was teaching that. And a student asked a question of essentially about that experiment, like of why didn't they get treatment? Why didn't they just go get like treatment? I said, well, this was before treatment existed, but even when it did, like they weren't as privileged as you guys are in your college classes. Like these are, they don't have the privileges that you guys enjoy by virtue of that time in culture and society where they were. And the student was aghast because apparently they said the student wrote a comment that said she was a black lesbian and she was offended that I would question her privilege, which is like demonstrable. She's at a $60,000 technical school in Florida with a free health clinic on campus. Demonstrably different than like poor black sharecroppers in 1930s with no health clinics, like fundamentally, like definitionally different in what you would think of as today as privilege. But the interesting part to what you asked about is what they said is they said, the comment was like, how dare I say that as a straight white man? And that gets to the core point of the problem here, which is that we start defining different rules in culture and society of who can say what, and therein lies the control. Because if I could have said it, if only for my gender and color and orientation, that's the problem. That's only some categories and intersections of categories are able to say those things and teach those things, then you're right back into the state of nature where might is right. And it's not principle that rules the day. It's not truth that governs us and guides us.
We're in trouble. I mean, we're in trouble when someone can do that. And if everybody can do that, well, then where does the truth even lie? And
well, there is no, that's all it does is lie. Yeah. All it does is lie, because there's no truth at that point. That's literally the heart of the matter, which is that they can, that's where it's your thoughts and your words that are controlled because of the intention of really what they want to do is control you, your behavior. And it's by controlling your thoughts and words by saying who's allowed to say what. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. Not in this country. I mean, that's why we separated from England, that now we get to see how terrible England is in their speech laws, where you are truly not allowed to say certain things. But while other people are, and that's not what we've had servicemen and women for hundreds of years fight and die to protect us from having to be subjected to. They called that tyranny back in the day. And that is where it ends, is when some people can tell you what you can and can't say, can and can't think, can and can't do. That is a core level of a problem of the contrast between liberty and tyranny. And you can't have categories that some people can say things in and other people's can't. because we don't look at people that way. That's a dehumanization of us as brothers and sisters in a community of citizens of the same nation. And, you know, there is no value in diversity of color. What we want is diversity of ideas, of experiences, of things you've lived and bring to the table. But like, you know, diversity of melanin, diversity of a gene that you didn't control before you were born, like that's not going to be a determining factor of any good or bad outcome of a team, of a program, of anything, because it's what you do in your life. It's what you do that makes the difference. The choices you make and the actions that you perform, that's not going to be governed by the melanin that you inherited. And so that certainly shouldn't be governing what you're allowed to say and think, or what job you can do or can't do. Like, we need to be protecting people from that discrimination. That's what the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was all about, was protecting people from the discrimination upon race and subsequently, you know, gender and all the other protected classes. And it's really gone full circle and kind of eaten itself.
Yeah, it has. How do you think and I apologize, I'm still trying to get my cameras to come back on, and hopefully I won't have to keep you on full screen the whole time, but I might. But definitely want to unpack this, because I think that it's so important that people understand the backstory of how we got here and why it's wrong. And then how you were able to take this philosophy and go, wait a minute, now the new administration is in place. They have instituted a policy at Florida Tech and all these other universities where this type of training and this type of indoctrination for critical race theory and other DEI focused content isn't going to be permitted. But that's not how your college reacted, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, there's a lot packed in there. I'll try to unpack a little bit, but let's see here. Yeah, so just to kind of end note or end cap that last part, you know, the element of, you know, your screen is off, but if my memory serves me right, and it may not, it's late and I have a 1-year-old that's kind of stolen my memory from me, but you know, you have red hair. Is that right?
I do. Yeah, reddish brown. Yes.
So like, do you think you and I are going to make better or worse teammates because I have brown hair and you have red hair? Like,
it's not going to make one iota of difference.
So like, what if we have a rule that says, you know, we need diversity, right? So you have red hair, so that will make my team a diverse cornucopia of a melting pot, and we'll do better because we'll have there. And what I'm getting at, right, is like the false premise that there's no reason to think that you and I would have different perspectives, thoughts, skills, team contributions because you're a redhead and I'm not.
That's such a good point. Such a good point.
And so, you know, it could be the case, but it doesn't have to be. So that factor alone doesn't really matter. And you could have a whole team of redheads or a team of blonde, brunettes, black hair, red hair, and that could be an awful team too, because the things that govern what make us good and work together and effective and successful, it's not the color of your hair. Well, you know, the genes for governing your hair, your skin, like they're effectively the same. So like when we say diversity, it's kind of being a semantic nerd here as an academic, but like it's half a sentence that's incomplete. What we need culturally, politically, legally is to say diversity of what? And that's not often provided in our semantic sentence. We just say diversity and we leave it open-ended, right? So that it can be used as a cudgel to push any thing you want to push. Redheads. Okay. Like diversity, if it's an open-ended question, what we need to say is diversity of what? And then it gives us something to work with in having that conversation social culturally. But like, you know, if it's just, you know, used as this wink and a nod word for like, you know, race or anything like that, like that's not helpful. And it's, and as we're finding out social culture, it's actually had a boomerang effect and really has, you know, undermined the effort that people might have wanted to pursue with good intentions. So you know, I would just add that part to like the diversity conversation, being a diversity fellow myself, which is that it really is very problematically anti-defined. That is, it doesn't allow the sentence to complete of what it is that's supposed to be different.
Right. Well, and I think that that's also what the problem is with it altogether, is the fact that it is deceptively advertised as being inclusive, but then when it's being based on something, like you said, that has absolutely nothing to do with what's going to make a good teammate or what's going to make a person the most qualified, it works against the very thing that it pretends to be advertising. But that's why I think a lot of people can't see through it.
And when you mentioned the inclusive part, I mean, this is a completely new construct for society. And in my recollection, over the last maybe 10 years or so, that whole part of inclusivity has seemed to really been added to our vernacular, the definitions, the boilerplate policy. And so again, I kind of look at that, and it's worth thinking about, well, inclusive of what? Like, what is it that's being inclusive? If you're being excluded from something, there's already anti-discrimination laws on the books. Like so what I'm saying is, people say this not all the time. Right now, that they catch the buzzwords, they'll switch around as belongingness or inclusivity. And I'm like, well, why would you want to go to a place that doesn't make you feel like you belong? But also, if you don't feel like, what they're saying is like, so let's say Florida Tech, for instance, I had colleagues that say, well, we need a belongingness committee. I'm like, well, then you're just saying that nobody makes you feel like you belong already. Well, why is that? Are they engaging in discrimination? If so, use the extremely powerful discrimination laws that have been on the books and codified since 1964, 1965, whenever that Civil Rights Act was put in place. So like what is it that you're trying to do that's not already achievable? And why are we using these coded language and euphemisms, as constructs? Like, so inclusivity, like, I mean, I don't know, like, do I need to be included in my wife's sewing circle? Not really.
Right.
Like, I don't know, like, if why does everyone have to be included into everything all the time? I don't know. Like, there's some spaces that you probably don't want me to be in.
Correct.
Like you have your private spaces that I don't have a right to be included.
Like I wouldn't go and try to storm a men's Bible study. Like, and I wouldn't say, oh, I have a right to be at the men's Bible study. No, I don't. If as citizens or as parishioners or whatever you want to call them, I want to start a women's Bible study, that's perfectly fine. But I don't get the right to just go into a men's Bible study and say, oh, well, it's only open to men, so I should have a right to get in there. And that's where I feel like this whole thing has just morphed into something that it should have never been. And
like, I would tell you to come on in. I'd be like, sure, like come to our meeting. I don't think you're gonna like it. Like, I think it's gonna be boring. I think you're gonna roll your eyes and you're gonna think it's lame, or like, there's times it might really connect and you might really enjoy it. And I don't know, like, but like, there's a part where, like, if you don't want me to come to your women's Bible meeting, like, I don't think I'd probably want to go. But if, like, you wanted to exclude me, okay, I guess, like, but anyways, I think we're kind of getting off track a little bit. But like, what ended up happening at Florida Tech that kind of intersected, no pun intended, with this DEI stuff, was that, the American people have had an election for president and a new administration came in. And since time immemorial, this administration happened to have done what every administration did before them, which is change a few things.
Sure.
Sometimes we agree with it. Sometimes we don't agree with it. Sometimes we're happy. Sometimes we're mad. Most of the time, people don't pay attention. This particular case, they issued some executive orders. These executive orders made it clear that anybody receiving federal funds is not supposed to be engaging in these kind of activities that called DEI or critical race theory, precisely for the reason that it's been, pretty demonstrably clear that they've been used as tools of discrimination against American citizens. And that is, illegal, All citizens are entitled to the government's duty to protect them from being discriminated against in any capacity, in education, in the workplace, hiring, all sorts of facets. And so they issue these executive orders, and it was a real culture shock. And what I would say is it really kind of, want to make sure, I'm not sure I have my timeline exactly correct here, but I know it was very closely related to similar rulings that happened from the Supreme Court, where they overturned longstanding findings from the court on affirmative action. So, I think that there was kind of like a cultural and psychological shockwave that was sent through the system, because
I do know what you're talking about. In academia, especially academia admissions, didn't they have a Supreme Court ruling that happened last year? And I don't remember when it was, but it basically said that academia could no longer, maybe it's only for ones that are receiving federal funds. I don't know how,
which is all
specific, which is all of them, which you can't say, okay, we're going to give more preference to this protected class. We're going to give more preference to this protected class. And my understanding was you could still do that at the military academies, but you couldn't do it on the college campuses that are civilian run. Was my understanding.
Broadly, if my memory serves me right, it was I think it was Students for Fair Admission was one of the parties against Harvard, or one of the Harvard's conglomerate schools. And so it effectively fell as you described it, which was saying that Harvard was found to be using race as a determining factor for admission, which is illegal and prohibited. They tried saying that it was justified by virtue of stare decisis, or the legal rulings of the past, establishing that they could do it under the framework of affirmative action. But the court basically overruled affirmative action and effectively got rid of it, maybe through that case and maybe a few others. But the point being that in raising it here is that, I think it was a shockwave through the country in respect to their collective psychology and culture, which is that this is something that is affirmative action that, like, most people were raised to think was both legally correct, morally correct, and justified and proper. And they lived their life that way. They ran their businesses. They governed their universities that way because it was essentially the law of the land. And they also felt that it coincided with just moral principles too. And I think that a little bit of salutary neglect had been happening, where it got away from the intended purpose, like we've spent some time discussing today, and started being used in this wrong way. And now there's this new ruling that turns that upside down. So a lot of people sort of, like, psychologically didn't know how to handle that.
I think you're right.
Because if you think about it, just in all fairness, it's like there's something that you think is morally right and legally right that you've been doing forever. Now you find out it's actually morally wrong and legally wrong. So what does that mean you've been doing forever?
Well, and there's a lot of people that simplified it and said, well, it's just giving somebody a leg up that would have never had it otherwise. Like, there's a lot of people who would say to me, because I used to not believe in affirmative action either, and I was on the other side where I thought it was unfair. And I remember a lot of people would say to me, well, Teresa, what about the person that didn't get all the opportunities that you got growing up, and this and that, and that they had to start at a different point than you? And I say, well, okay, but then what happens when that person gets to a particular position, or they get into an institution, and now they're at such a disadvantage that, yes, they could probably keep up, or they could probably catch where the other people are, but it didn't fundamentally solve the problem to begin with, which was, okay, we have to go back further into our neighborhoods. We have to go back further into economic instability. We can't just fix the problem by giving somebody an advantage. It doesn't fix the root issue, and it just causes more issues. But what you're saying, Rick, is that it really fundamentally shook people to their core, because there's a lot of people who still believe in it. And even today, I can tell you, I got in hot water 2 or 3 years ago by suggesting that the White House press secretary was a diversity hire. I think that I think based on, so this is the previous one under Biden, and I still believe that it's possible that she got her an advantage because of diversity. I don't know for sure, but I made that suggestion and I got attacked to the point where people were contacting my chain of command and really trying to get me in trouble for that. So it wasn't even a conversation that I could have.
I don't know much about the hiring of Karine Jean-Pierre, but yeah, I think you just picked the wrong person, because if you would have just said that Kamala was a diversity hire, you would have been right, because that's literally what the president of the United States described as the reason why he picked her, was for the categories of protected class that she enjoyed of her race and gender. So by definition, she was picked essentially as what people refer to as a diversity hire. Like, that was just
right.
Like, I don't know, as from their words, that's just what they told us. But
right.
Like, and this kind of what I was getting to, right? Is that fair to the vice president? I don't think so, right? Like, he never should have said that, because now she could be the most qualified person in the world. I don't happen to think that she was, but she could have been.
Right.
And instead, you've got half of the country completely, talking smack on her for a completely unnecessary reason and series of assumptions, because the president who hired her said that's why he hired her.
Right.
Picked her. So like, it's
you're
a
right.
good illustration of the problem to everyone involved. It's not a fair approach, and it's literally just picking winners and losers. And that's a dangerous game to be playing of Russian roulette, because sooner or later that Russian roulette is going to come back and we're going to lose that game. If we're picking winners or losers, one of the days we're going to be those who are picked to be the losers. And you don't want, it's not a just way to have a society. And ultimately that's really what the Supreme Court's ruling said. They basically said, as noble of a principle as what might want to be pursued, racism is not the cure for racism. There has to be a better pathway. It's not the court's job to find out and to come up with the idea of what the better pathway is. But if the pathway is, using race to select people, or to using race to not select people, that can't be a way that we build good bonds as a culture and community with the citizens that should be our friends and our neighbors and family members. And it hasn't been, right. We've seen that degrade as these discriminatory policies have been put in place for about the last 10 or 15 years. So, that's one thing that started happening is at Florida Tech is you have these new policies come in place that juxtaposes on top of the new laws that are also put in place, very much in line with the consistent executive orders, because executive orders kind of have to be in line with, the laws and the Supreme Court. So those things were happening, and the university was like not wanting to comply. And that's kind of where it came to me, is like, we had meetings with the president and the entire School of Psychology that, I was at, and I had been out of, so it was so weird for me, because I had been on family medical leave for the birth of a baby during the election. I wasn't around at all on campus during this like hot political season. I wasn't very much like aware of it. I was like, I had a special needs child and a postpartum wife. Like that was just not on my radar. And so we go to these meetings and people are flipping out about it. Faculty members are crying because they've built research programs based upon critical race theory or all these other like actual pseudoscience garbage research applications or teachings that are just not valid constructs that they've built their garbage classes on in psychology at Florida Tech. And they're crying in class, or excuse me, in the meeting. And the president comes to our meeting and basically says, listen, we need to look like we're going to comply.
Right. And I want to, at this point, go to the clip because I think that even shows more of what we can see than what you're showing me. So I think we'll start with
the
this.
TLDR version is they said, we're not going to comply, but we're going to lie and we're going to do it. We're going to make it look like we're complying, but I want you to keep
to tell
right.
And so
I'm going to play this. Tell me if you can hear it. I'm going to go ahead and play just a little bit of this. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's
okay.
Well, I can see my team at Johnson Space Center.
Okay. So let me see. Let me make sure I'm showing you. Oh, okay. So let me see if I can go to the actual, let me get rid of this then. Go me 1 second. Get rid of that. Add this.
It was shocking as you're saying this. Like,
yeah.
You're ready. Like I'm just sitting there coming in off of like family leave. And that's really the core answer. What happened to me is like, forget about DEI, forget about critical race theory, social politics, all of that stuff. I go to a meeting and all I hear is like, there's a new sheriff in town. There's a new policy from the federal government to maintain our grants. We're not going to follow it. And I'm like,
it's crazy.
Hold on. Like, I want to make sure I keep my grants, but I also just like at a level of principle, like I don't want to be involved in a conspiracy to defraud, no matter the topic.
Right. All right. Can you see you looking at the screen right now?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So for the people that are our listening audience, we're just going to play a little bit of this clip. So this is basically the president explaining to his staff how they're going to continue to teach these programs, even though they've been prohibited from teaching these programs. Is that correct?
Effectively. Yeah. I mean, he'll hear it from his own words, but,
yep.
Yeah, he's pretty sneaky, man. And he just lied and lied and lied.
All right, here we go.
Says they received $69 million in Title IV funding for students. And so that's way more than $7 million. That's why he can afford to lose $7 million. He's came to our meeting to tell us, go under the radar. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing these values of DEI. He says, I believe critical race theory is important to teach. It's a valuable class. Keep teaching it. But don't get caught.
Don't get caught.
Don't get caught, because this is what he was wanting. It was a $69 million fraud, not just a $7 million fraud.
But it's not just $7. It's ease grants at the state level. As the federal policy changes, our students have tremendous amounts of dollars supporting them.
Oh, here we go. Brian Elrick, the vice president, said the bulk of the Title IV funds went to direct loans. Losing Title IV funding would mean closing the doors.
It's certainly one of the things that the president wanted stricken right away from contracts or from grants from the Department of Education.
The president, a man named John Nicklow, talking about changing the wording to get around the presidential executive order in order not to lose funding. Can I show you that clip real quick? Just not true. It's not true.
No. And if we had to change some words so they're not being scraped and so we're not targeted, it allows us to do our work.
Just tell the truth, man. So this guy denying that he changed the words, that's what he did.
He never said change your deeds, change your actions.
Right. Because he acknowledges what he's doing is wrong.
All right, I'm going to stop there for a second. Could you hear all that?
Yeah.
That's just crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and I was kind of like wondering, like, my ears hearing this the right way? And I get, this happened originally. That meeting was April 4th. And so there's been a lot of comments I've gotten from people. And one of the most common ones is like, why is the president of a university so stupid? Like, why would he come and just admit it all and say it all? And, outside of cheekiness and easy, fun comments in that respect, like, my very serious kind of response back to people is that they're really holding academia in far too high of esteem, particularly under the dimension of intelligence. And the people that have been in academia are effectively, in my observation, broadly speaking, middle to bottom dwellers. And the reason I say that is because there's been a brain drain in academia for the last 15 years. And that's not me telling you that. You can find all sorts of articles and other commentaries and things that people have written in academia about the brain drain, and for lots of different reasons. But the industry has become so corrupted and problematic, in part because of like similar conversations like we were having. We weren't advancing and selecting people based on skill and merit, but on unrelated factors and variables. And it drove out our best performers. People were either tired of the system, tired of the corruption in academia, and it doesn't always pay very well. People weren't always treated very well. Tenure is grossly abused and problematic, which I had, by the way. I was a tenured professor at this point, hard earned. And what that means is, so you have kind of a selection bias such that if all your best people are leaving, and they are, and they have long time ago, already driven out, then when you need a position filled in the higher to middle to lower management, your options are by definition only able to select from the middle to the bottom of the people who are left, who weren't good enough to leave or whatever. Now I say that, right, with proper acknowledgement. There's exceptions to this. There are still wonderful, exceptional people who are very smart in academia. They tend to be the minority of people. They're the exception to the rule. And that tracks on the dimension of ethics too. You know, there's some people who are extremely ethical, have great integrity. They're few and far between, though. I've been blessed to know them. I count them as dear friends, some of whom don't even, naturally, right? We don't agree on everything, whatever. But I love them dearly because we actually can respect each other and they're good people. So, but again, few and far between. And that's how you end up in a situation with this. How can he be so dumb? Well, he's already pretty dumb. He literally, not even in that clip, but later on, he's like, so guys, really like keep doing this, but I don't want to put a bullseye on it. Like it's going to put a target on us. So just stay under the radar. And he says, so really be mindful of who you say things to and be careful.
Oh, should I play that? Can we play that? Is that on that same clip? I might want to go to that. That sounds
I don't know that might be the one little clip that's not in there, but
okay.
I'll see what I can do. I'll see if I can send you a link to it, but it's a very small little segment, but it's fun. It's ironic because universities are not the bastions of intelligence that people think they are if they're not from the university world. And if you're from the military background too, like I have a lot of respect for the military, but in the same way that, academia has cultivated sort of this brand of being the intelligentsia, and the military has cultivated the brand of being, nothing but upstanding, honored,
warriors and war fighters. But we're in the same boat, Rick. We're going through the same things that you're going through in academia.
Yeah. And so like, it's not to say that there's not people with courage and integrity and honor and heroism.
Absolutely, there are.
But you also had General Mark Milley say that it was an absolutely valid strike on that innocent family in Afghanistan after the Abbey Gate tragedy, when it turns out they absolutely just droned an innocent family and nobody was held accountable. So like, I only say that just to provide the examples of like, things are not always as they're branded, and things have kind of gotten away from what gave that branding through hard-earned sacrifice.
Absolutely. I mean, we are not immune, and that was the whole reason I wanted to have you on, Rick, is because we also in the military saw the way the best and the brightest got fed up with the system and got fed up with a lot of the same politics that you experienced in academia. And we said, no, we're not going to serve in an organization that doesn't prize impact and doesn't prize results, but instead is prizing all these other intangibles that aren't really contributing to making us better or making us more lethal. And
yeah,
so
so you're basically selecting against heroism and courage, because you're having the courage to say that, and having the courage to actually uphold the integrity of the standard of excellence, where versus the people left standing for them to select from are those who opted not. And so what we see in academia on the same dimension is that in respect to like tenure or upper administration, what it ends up doing, people think tenure confers this ability to like speak freely. And it does in some respects, but I got fired for speaking freely. So take that to the bank on tenure. But really the thing to think about is that you got to think about it in terms of evolution and these selection factors. Whether you're in the military or in the civilian worlds of academia, you're selecting people, in this case for tenure, who've learned to tuck their courage in a box and tie it to an anchor and send it over the ship to the bottom of the sea in order to go along and get along so that they can get that promotion, so they can get tenure. And then even when they have tenure, then it's only 6 more years until they make full professor, where there's a little bit better money. So don't rock the boat, don't speak the truth, don't maintain the standard, don't maintain integrity, excellence, do your job. And instead, those people are disincentivized, and actually they make their own decision, if not are driven out to leave. And what you're left with standing on the inside of those organizations are people who are actually selected against the factor of courage or integrity or, those things. And here's the thing. Once you get to those levels, whether you're a general, a colonel, an admiral, a tenured professor, a dean, a president, whatever that is, that you reach your career, at some point you're then going to have these instances of physical or moral or civic courage. And you're not going to have the muscles trained, the moral muscle.
Oh, Rick, that's such a good point.
To be able to lift the weight necessary. Right. And I used to sit on the ROTC boards that we would do mock candidate, officer candidate boards before students were commissioned. And I always extolled to them. I'm like, everybody talks about physical courage in the military, but the majority of your career, even if you're an infantryman, by definition, statistically cannot be in combat. You will be on base in the States or on base overseas.
Yep.
You will have so many opportunities to do right and to do wrong, to have courage or cowardice in every piece of paper you sign and every decision you make, like in ways that you don't necessarily think about as a 21-year-old, officer candidate. But you need those courages, that you need those instances of courage to make, if you're a general, an admiral, a captain, whatever your thing is, there will be times that you will have to make a very difficult decision, and you will have to make the right decision that might be the toughest thing to decide. Like, the right thing is not always the easy thing, but it is the right thing. And if you're not used to exercising that muscle and emotionally knowing how to be a leader when people might hate you for doing the right thing, or you might draw heat upon yourself or stepping out and fire from pseudo enemies or whatever. If you don't know how to do that, you haven't built that moral muscle, as you might call it, then when the time comes,
you're just not going to do it.
Well, you can't, and you won't know how to. Like, you don't get to choose your battles in these instances. They're generally brought to your door, especially if you're an officer. Generally, people bring you a bunch of problems that you need to solve, or they need your decision as the general or the admiral or whatever the thing is. You got to make the call. And if you're not used to doing that in a courageous way that follows and honors the truth with integrity to what's right and proper and just, then that time when you've missed it for all the little things, and you don't expect it to come, but you're just lost the game of musical chairs and it's at your desk now, you're not going to know how to do it, even if you want to do it.
That's true. You know what you're going to do in the military is you're just going to say, talk to my JAG. That's what you're going to say. You're going to say, talk to my lawyer, or you're going to avoid any kind of confrontation with the person that you wronged. And you're just going to gaff it off to somebody else and try to pass away the problem. And the fact that you stood up in this most recent instance is not a surprise to me once I understood your past. And once I understood, and we won't really have time to get into what happened in your first university, but you can go to James O'Keefe's show and you talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, what happened in your childhood. Those two instances, I think, primed you to take this on. But you took this to a whole new level. You recorded it.
Well, they recorded it. Let me just say that first. They recorded too. The university records it. So they keep minutes of that meeting, and they take their own recordings. Everyone in that room had a recorder.
Sure. And anyone could have recorded it. Right.
And they did. They did. And you know how I know that? Is because they've released minutes of those meetings every single month for 5 years. And once they were caught red-handed with their hand in the cookie jar, it's the only time in 5 years that I've been there that they said, we're not giving you out the minutes now that we've been caught red-handed. He looked right into a big orange tripod you can see on my Substack. I have a picture of it. He has someone's phone right in front of him. They record those. I promise you. And it's been, and I literally have their recording.
Well, no, you showed us in the James O'Keefe video. I think I saw, or it might have been on your Twitter, or your X. I did see too that they had previous meeting minutes. So of course we know that those meeting minutes were there. But I think my larger point is what gave you the thought to say, okay, what do I do with this? I have this recording of this very explosive thing that is completely illegal. Now, what the heck do I do with it? Like, walk us through a little bit about what your thought process was.
Well, you wrestle with a little bit because sometimes it's not easy to know what the right way is, although I knew what the right thing was.
Sure.
You can do the right thing through many different ways. And I knew that they were committing fraud because they said so.
Sure.
You know, like they said it, don't get caught. It said, we don't want to find ourselves in court. They said they didn't even want to write it down. That's why he came to tell us in person. People are like, why is this guy so dumb? Because they said, we don't want to get caught. We don't want to have it used as evidence against us. That was their writing. I'm quoting their words. So like he said that it's going to be problematic if they're caught. So we should be careful on what we say. Now, he didn't say to change your deeds. He didn't say to change your actions. It's like, I feel like this is what I have to talk to my 4-year-old about. Like, you know, like, and so like, when I say they committed fraud, like they said so, that's effectively, like they were telling me that. And so what do you do when, like I just got done saying a moment ago in our conversation, you don't get to pick in life sometimes the times when that knock comes on the door where, you know, God's given you a scenario where like you have to do the right thing. Well, what does the rules require at the university? Like, well, it requires us reporting, doing the right thing. Like if we find fraud, we have to report it. The year beforehand, the head of the School of Psychology, Julie Kostopoulos, and the chair of the psychology undergraduate program, Travis Conrad, both of them are like effectively cognitive peasants in the respective like professional psychology. Like they're very low caliber scientists and psychologists. And they were so dumb at demonstrating that they wrote us an email in the same way saying, we're going to misappropriate these funds from the university, but don't tell our colleagues because we don't want to get in trouble. So I had already had to report that, and I reported it to the president. I know John Nicklow, old Johnny Nicklow, and he asked to be my reference for the astronaut program. And John and I know John. He's written me several letters, you know, congratulating me for all the positive impacts I made on the university and helped them out. And so he knows the rules, and that I have already had to report misappropriation of funds internally. But now, you know, you catch the president defrauding. So like, where are you going to go? Report it to the people underneath him who work for him?
Yeah.
And by the way,
that's not an option. Nope.
No. And so, you know, like this isn't a cartoon we're in here, Teresa, as you know well, right? In real life, in these organizations and systems, there are real pragmatics and social politics that govern this. And so as it was, that misappropriation of funds that I had caught of Julie Kostopoulos and Travis Conrad, I'd reported that to the director of HR and the vice president of HR and to the president himself. And not only did they cover it up, they had not yet even given a full response to that for 6 to 12 months at the time of that meeting that came out through O'Keefe. And so I knew they were sitting on it. I knew that they had a history of covering it up. And I had already experienced instances where I knew that they were liars. And I knew that they lie. And I know that they don't follow policy or tell the truth. And here I have the president admitting that he lied to the face of the governor's office of the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis, to get a $7 million grant.
That's just crazy.
He said he drove home and said, and he comes to our meeting and says, I want to fight back. Why don't we fight back against Ron DeSantis and the Trump administration? So, like, what do you do? That's kind of like, that's a good ethical question for your people. What do you do when your boss comes in and tells you that on record, that's being recorded? And like, how do you avoid not going to jail or getting caught yourself for being a co-conspirator to that? And so, you know, what we decided to do in that respect is I went to James because I knew that James could get it to the governor. And the first place we reported it before it was published is we took it to the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Florida, which is a guy named Ronald DeSantis. He's the governor. He's the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Florida. So we took it to him and we asked for comment. His office responded and they gave official statement that day. And then the story broke. So with the knowledge that it was the governor himself who was being defrauded on behalf of us as taxpayers and citizens of the state and government of Florida by the sitting president of the Florida Institute of Technology for a $7 million grant, I went right to the guy who was defrauded and who has the capability of actually taking legal action as the chief legal officer. And I knew that, by way of the media, he would pay attention rather than having it get lost in emails and non-responsive. And that's exactly what happened. He responded that day.
Rick, if he had responded with, "This is an outrage, we will take care of this immediately," would you and James have taken it further?
We wouldn't have had to, for one.
That's my point.
So what's kind of funny here is that, like, so the governor responded. He said, yeah, this meeting happened. Like, we did tell them not to be woke, and we did tell them essentially that their students are going to be worse off with a worse education.
I saw the statement, but that doesn't answer, like,
no,
we're going to take care of it.
Well, and that's what's really interesting. So he dodged it entirely, and I like him. I was voted for him. Like, as it happens, I feel like I owe my wife's life to him because she died in my arms during COVID, giving late birth to our first son. And I was able to save her life by virtue of being in the delivery room with her. And I was able to see what doctors had missed, and she ended up living miraculously. And so that was because Florida was one of the few states that allowed husbands to be present in delivery rooms during COVID. So I have a deep appreciation for the governor in that respect at a very personal level. But I was definitely very disappointed because he dodged it. And he said, well, but this is a private university, and so we can't do anything about it, which Ron is such a smart guy. I know that he knows that's not true because it was literally the state funds that he could have taken back that he was caught being defrauded of. So, like, there's lots of things that can be done. For whatever reason, their staffer issued that statement or whatever, but we are suing the university. And if I have to, I'll depose him and we'll find out what really happened and what the rationale and reasoning was behind that. But, he could have really stayed on brand and taken a stronger stand. But, God works in the way that God works. And I'm just a dumb cog in the wheel. You know, so because of the way that things played out, you know, that matter was allowed to kind of like hang out there. And so James and I really had an opportunity to continue. And that's kind of what's happened here since April. Where I was able to actually then file complaints to the federal level at the Office of Civil Rights for the Department of Justice, the Office of Civil Rights for the Department of Education, the National Science Foundation, the Attorney General of the state of Florida. We were able to then kind of like, you know, make sure that we were able to report the truth of these things out. And as we did that, then it turned out then that Florida Tech convened a secret meeting to try to strip me of tenure and fire me, then called me and asked me to resign as a settlement. And I said, settlement to what? And then they offered me a year's salary, $96,000, if I would sign a non-disclosure agreement and promise never to sue them and not talk about it. And I already wasn't even talking about it. I wasn't in the media. I didn't even have a social media profile. Like, I didn't have an account. I was silent. I was taking care of my sick wife and kid at home and writing neuroscience papers like a nerd. And like, because that's what I was doing. I had students at my house working for free in the summer, coming to visit and working on papers and discoveries on the NASA project and everything, like doing my job even when I wasn't being paid in the summer, like, because we're passionate about teaching and science and research. And then they're like, shut up. And I'm like, I'm already shut up. What are you talking about? And they're like, we'll pay you to shut up. And I'm like, but I'm already shut up. What are you talking about? And when we read that, it was so insulting to think that to think that they thought my integrity could be bought at any price at all, and that you could put a price on the truth. That we said, absolutely not. We turned that offer down, and I was fired with nothing just a few days later. That's why we have a Give, Send, Go account for any listeners that might be inclined, motivated.
And I will show the audience that and link to it. I did link to it in the show notes. But the one thing I also want to point out about this is that obviously this strategy usually works, or they wouldn't have done it, and which is sad. So number one. And then number two, what grounds did they give you for firing? You're a tenured professor. And so I'm curious what they put as their explanation as they fired you.
Yeah. So great. So two questions. Great points on across all boards. What was the first thing you asked before so the grounds they said was insubordination, which wasn't true because I wasn't insubordinate. There was never something that they told me to do that I had to do that I didn't do. Never happened. Even if it did, they never told me about that, never gave me a chance to explain myself. Maybe there was context. Like, there was no hearing, no due process. It was a secret star chamber. Like, I have no idea. Like, they didn't say. And the only thing it can be is retaliation for having blown the whistle on their $76 million of fraud, because 3 days before that meeting in April 4th, I got a letter from the provost offering me an updated, renewed contract as a tenured professor for an indefinite period of time. That means forever. And so anything that I could have done to break that contract would have happened after that contract. The only thing that happened that they wouldn't have been happy about was reporting the truth of their sneaky lies to defraud the state and federal governments. And here's why I say that. Because the meeting happened at April 4th. The news broke April 10th. And that was like a Thursday or Friday or whatever it was. But basically, I was on family medical leave every day after that story broke until the end of that academic year's contract, basically like May 5th or May 10th. And then we're not paid. We're not employed to do work in the summer when I'm terminated. So like, there was not even a physical day I could have worked by federal law in order to have been insubordinate doing something other than telling the truth and blowing the whistle on federally protected activity of a $76 million fraud in the least, probably more than that, which is absolutely federally protected. So they said it was insubordination. They won't say why because they're cowards. and I'm on unemployment. When I had to file for Florida unemployment, I had to list that as the reason. And
Right.
the way that it works is if you were terminated for cause, you don't get unemployment. And
wow.
So
and guys, I'm showing the screen here of his Give, Send, Go. So if you go here and it just says the truth is not for sale, and it's got the explanation of everything we've been talking about. And then what I also like about your website, Rick, is that you've also got updates, which is nice. So as people are following the journey, they can kind of see the progression of where this is going and how this has progressed through there. And you knew about James O'Keefe because you were a fan, right? He was just did you cold call him? Like, did you just reach out to him one day and say, hey, I've got this recording?
Yeah. So it turns out I just sent a thing on his tip line because I was concerned about this fraud. And one of my best friends and mentors is a UFC fighter and Olympic Hall of Famer, Matt Lindland. And I was asking him for advice. I'm like, what do I do about this? Like,
sure.
how do I properly report the truth of this out in a way that'll actually reach the people that can take proper action to do the right thing? And Matt suggested reaching out to James. And so I sent a tip line in, and he gets hundreds. And so I've had a chance to get to know James over the past 6 months or so. We've become pretty close friends. And so, like, I know he gets thousands of messages. The guy does so much. He's really does an incredible job that I mean, like I said, it was God's hand in how it all shook out. And it ended up working out in that respect. But I mean, yeah, I guess I wrote it up in a way that caught his eye, and he saw the data, he saw the evidence, and it speaks for itself,
It does.
And, as a scientist, that's what I'm used to doing is selling the data story to an editor, to reviewers for the scrutiny of, the fire of peer review. And so you learn how to package your information and the evidence in a way that is distilled to being understandable in a message. And then it builds upon that in conversation. So that's kind of how that worked. I feel like you asked me a question earlier before that I skipped, and I forget what it was, but in short, I mean, the journey has been pretty incredible, and it hasn't been possible without the support of people on that Give, Send, Go. I mean, people have been very generous to the level of $5 or $10 if that's all they've been able to donate and support. But it's allowed my family to survive on short notice of termination. We lost our health insurance, with a sick baby and postpartum wife on no notice while having tenure, which is supposed to protect you from these things. And how do they do that? I mean, like I said, we don't know. We're going to find out in litigation how they concocted that secret star chamber and the lies that they must have put forth to do it. But, it's funny. I had a mentor of mine in undergraduate who I still collaborate and consider a friend and a mentor. He laughed about it at the suggestion of insubordination. He said, the entire point of tenure is to be insubordinate.
And it's just, it smacks in the face. It reminds me of the military. Like in the military, we say that we want people to be brave and we want them to have courage. But then when you are brave and you have courage and you do speak up, then you get smacked down. And I feel like it's a very similar phenomenon is what happened to you. You spoke up, and it really also disappoints me that the governor's office didn't take more action. Like, I'm still trying to understand that they clearly were violating the administration's policies on DUI and DEI. You had proof of it. And they still, to this day, as far as I know, haven't owned the fact that they are taking action against Florida Tech because of it.
It's very off-brand for the DeSantis administration. I'll tell you that.
And that's the thing, Rick. Like, that's why this story needs to be blown wide open. And I realize I'm just one small podcaster in a sea of many, many shows and many other kinds of media out there. But I wanted to do my part to support you and to bring your story to my audience, because it just shocks me that something like this, that's so obviously wrong, so obviously immoral, so obviously against the policy, could have gone so unnoticed, not only unnoticed, but punishing you and then just continuing on as though it never even happened. That just, it blows my mind. It really does. And I think that unfortunately it'll probably take the court system to unravel this through months and sadly maybe perhaps years. But I really do hope that in the end you are vindicated on a larger level. And thank God that James took your story. And I mean, he not only took your story, as we'll see here, he awarded you this award right here just recently, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things I like to keep the people updated with on the Give Send Go account is just the last couple of weeks we had a very special opportunity to be awarded at Trump's Mar-a-Lago Resort in a black tie gala. And again, that was due in large part due to the help and contributions of everybody chipping in and helping out. It's helped us to stay sustained and survived. And the great part about Give Send Go is you can also offer prayers too, which is one of the unique facets of that platform. And so we've really been sustained by prayer, but also by people's donations. And we try to share that back and keep them involved, because I consider everybody kind of big, team members of this journey, because we can't do it alone. We're doing it together. And James was very gracious. He had my wife and I down there, and it was quite the honor. And so, kind of weaving together your earlier questions about, like, if this would have been handled properly in the beginning, first by Florida Tech, all they had to do is follow the law.
Right. Then you wouldn't even be here. Yeah.
Yeah. Then all they had to do was not, like, create a Barbara Streisand effect by insulting me with a hush money against my integrity, and then firing me for which is illegal in its own right. So follow the law there too. But if the DeSantis administration might have jumped on it early, we wouldn't have continued to take it so far forward, where we'd end up at Trump's Mar-a-Lago. And it was truly, truly humbling to see the collection of other heroes and whistleblowers that they were honoring, and journalists there, and being able to give a speech to a room full of millionaires and billionaires and people supporting truth and courage in a world which is so often mired in lies and cowardice, was so inspiring and humbling that it was just surreal. And it made me feel very, very small as a bit in God's larger plan, such that, like, at that event, I mean, I had the chance, and I met a couple different times that night with the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon.
Is this her right here? Oh, hold on. Let me get this one down. This is her, correct?
That is. She was stunning that night, was very elegant and very gracious with her time. And James had a video segment describing this fraud, and $69 million of it shown from the stage at Mar-a-Lago to this esteemed group of donors and supporters and guests, including the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. And we had you might imagine, we had a wonderful conversation.
Oh, I bet you did.
And, I said, the person who was defrauded by that was actually you.
And what did she say to that?
She said, really? And I said, yeah, everything that happened in that video, the person that the president of the university was scared of losing funds from was you. And we had a very nice conversation. She was very interested, and she asked how she can get back in touch with me and make sure we put an end to this. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And so, that wouldn't have happened without the pathway that took us there. That pathway was not an easy one. It was not one that went straight uphill or downhill. It zigzagged left, right, up, down. It's, that was one that we had to really learn to truly have faith and trust that we were following God's plan. And that's how we ended up deciding to do the right things that we decided to do with the courage that we had. And by we, I mean my wife and I. Like, she's an absolute stalwart champion, and without whom I wouldn't have been able to do this. But we tried everything else up until that point. Like I said, I reported the misappropriation of funds to the president. Up until that point, they buried it. They covered it up. They lied about it. Jessica Vinson, the vice president of HR, she lied. And then she told me the other people lied. Like, it was so systemic that we knew that every time we tried to do it our way, God kept saying, no, do it my way, do it his way. And so, you know, that was the pathway that we were on, because we ended up trusting. We're like, this is the only way that is now available to go. The court of public opinion. We have to take it public. The public has to know. They have a right to know. It's their money.
They do. Yeah.
It's their money. We're stewards of it. We're not owners of it. We're stewards. And that's a great responsibility that comes with. And with that responsibility, I mean, we have to speak the truth of what we're doing with their money. Or if not,
and it's bigger than just a administration decision. That's really what I also want to emphasize to my audience here. This isn't just Rick wanting to make sure they follow what President Trump wanted. This is a destructive ideology that has been seeped into people's minds that is tearing our nation apart. And they were trying to continue that. An initiative was put forth to try to stop this from happening. And people, like you said, were crying about it. People's entire identity has been wrapped up into this. And
in respect to research, like, they were doing really bad research. Like, there's really bad quality research built around critical race theory and these kind of like ideological constructs that are a waste of money. But, you know, I've been in academia for 25 years, and there's been all sorts of policies that were right and wrong, moral, immoral, that administrations and governments imposed and required us to follow. But like, I've never been told not to follow them by the president of a university and told to engage in a wider conspiracy to defraud against that. Even if we disagreed with it, we would, there's a right way to disagree and take that forward by questioning it in the courts, to do other things.
You brought that out on James's show as well.
Yeah. Like I really want to make that point too, that it's, you know, like, there's layers to it. Yes, there's definitely moral shortcomings to DEI that hurt people and discriminate against people. There's also just like, it's the right thing to do irrespective of any policy. If you're, you know, if you tell your kids that a bunch of the other kids in school try to get you to sign on to doing something wrong, no matter what that wrong thing is, they shouldn't do the wrong thing. And so, you know, if that wrong thing happens to also be deeply problematic and immoral on top of that, that's a secondary wrong that they shouldn't do. But like you were alluding to, like, this critical race theory is deeply based in Marxist ideology. It ends up, and I've seen this, I've seen the back ends to it, like in the academic world. That is the embryonic womb where the embryo is built in as an ideology that's then shipped out into society and culture and to the students who take it back to their places of work, to the Pentagon, to the armed services, and use it as a Trojan horse that takes this anti-American Marxist ideology that teaches people to hate their country.
Yeah.
How are you going to fight and die for a country that you're taught to hate? That's not appropriate. It's not healthy for this. It's not even right for this, for our nation. And we have a duty to that too. I was a captain in the Air Force Auxiliary. We take an oath to defend this nation against all threats, foreign and domestic. Like, that's not something that we can look the other way on with honor and integrity.
Right.
Like,
and this is when you were with the auxiliary, right?
Yes. Yeah. That was the Aerospace Education Officer of the Year for the California Wing. And I think that's actually a National Commander's Commendation Award potentially too, back in 2019.
Yeah.
So it's like we take oaths, and people maybe don't often think about what that means when we make a promise and give an oath, and we should follow that. If we, like, the truth matters, and society is a better place when we honor the truth and do that. And the truth isn't always easy to do. Sometimes it's really hard to do, but the way you do it when it's really hard is practicing in the times when it's less hard, and sometimes when it's really easy, or just, like, we have to grow into those times. And, when you look back, like, I'm an old man, I feel like now, middle-aged dad, like, you look back in life, in all the hardships that certainly I've experienced at different points, I see in retrospect that I only was able to get through them because of earlier hardships that I went through that got me ready to face that next challenge.
Bingo.
And so, like, God gives us those things, again, to build those moral muscles, physical muscles too. But, like, we do have to have the emotional strength and psychological capabilities to wrestle with those larger demons as they go. And it's like a video game. Each level gets tougher and tougher as we go through life, but we get the tools as we go to grow and be stronger and stronger to beat those tougher and tougher levels. And so, I've seen that happen in this situation and through life in that respect. Because you have to speak up and say the truth. In this case, it was a combination. It was just legally fraud and asked to do something, like, just legally, structurally wrong, but then morally wrong. And then at that bigger level to our nation, teaching anti-American hate of discrimination, like actual discrimination. DEI discriminates. That's not me saying it. It's the Department of Justice, Office of Civil Rights, and the United States Supreme Court. That's not appropriate. That is not a way to build a country of people who love each other and are friends and neighbors and get along with each other. We cannot pitch people in that way. Like, we have to find what unites us rather than hinge upon what divides us. And it must be the things that unite us, that we share, that we use as neighbors to overcome the things that we might differ upon. And it must be the way. And what they were trying to do was the opposite of that, and keep teaching the things that are so divisive, that have made this country so divisive, made people hate each other. And that's not appropriate.
Nope.
It's not right.
It's not. You took the right stand, Rick. You really did. And you did something that I admire, and I know my audience admires. And I can tell you that you're just going to continue to grow no matter where you go, and no matter what happens from this point forward. You're just going to continue, and another opportunity is going to make itself available after this period. And after you get through this fight, I don't know if it's going to be, like I said, a book, a movie, another position where you're perfectly suited to be doing the kind of work that you've done. I don't know, but I just know that you've done something that I wish everyone had the courage to do, and I really admire you for it.
Well, thank you. I mean, I was inspired, to be perfectly frank. When I was scared at times, like, I was inspired by the people who did the same before me. Like, I looked at other, people who had spoken the truth or were whistleblowers and paid the price. I was inspired by saints who are martyrs. And this came out right around the time of just about Easter. Like I said, it was about April 4th. There was a lot happening in that time. It was right around Easter time. So there was like the Lent season. And I really was, reflecting a lot upon the passion and the martyrs and the people who've paid the price for telling the truth. And I laughed at times when I realized that, because I was scared and didn't, about telling the truth at times. And then I realized those people died, and they'd laugh at me with shame at how, like, silly. Is this just a job, or it's just a career? Like there's real strength and courage there. And I remember looking at, other instances of podcasts on James's show, of whistleblowers who spoke the truth in such courageous and elegant ways that it helped me have the strength and encouragement to follow their footsteps. And I hope that me sharing this story will do likewise for others to continue that, because we need the truth in society. We need it spoken, we need it shared, and we need people not intimidated or scared to say it and to do it. And it sounds like a simple thing, but it's not always an easy thing, but it's a necessary one. And we're all going to be better for it, because no matter, especially the dirtiest, ugliest truths, that's how you improve a country. That's how you improve a company, an organization, a family. Like medically, like you got to cut the cancers out. You got to cut the gangrene out, like clean out the wounds.
Yep. I agree.
With the truth is the antiseptic. No matter what the pain is, tell the truth and it will set us free. And we can package it up and bandage it up and move on and heal and actually heal and be good. And that's my what I would message to people, because it really does work that way. It's not always easy. It's not always hard, but like, I'm really, really inspired. Just like you said, the last few weeks, like, you know, the courage that James has to support and tell our stories, and people like you to share and tell our stories, that takes courage too. Because one of the things I told a lot of the donors and supporters at that event at Mar-a-Lago was that, you know, it takes courage for us to say the truth, but in one respect, like, nobody cares what we say. Like, because we don't have all the voice that we have is to say it, but like somebody like James or somebody like you, the platforms by which to share it, like that takes courage to put it forward too. And that can't happen without the support of the team of donors and supporters and staffers and people. It's really one big team in pursuit of just sharing the truth, whatever that is, because the truth will always make us better. It'll always make us stronger, even if it's scary, even if it's ugly. But it will set us free, and it will always be the bonds that build us with strength. You don't ever get better in the long term by a lie. And something that I always end up having to be asked from people, and I always end up saying, is they're like, well, you really paid the price for telling the truth, or that, like, you know, and I'm like, well, you know, think about the price I would have paid. Yeah, I lost my job. I lost a lot of money. Lost a lot of things. We really had been struggling and really, really impacted with difficulty, substantively. But think of the price that you pay if you would have gone along with a lie. Think about the price you pay if you would have taken that $96,000 buyout, if you would have sold your integrity out. There is a price to pay for that, and we don't always think about that. There's a price to pay, and you may not even realize you're paying it, but it's a price that's paid with your soul. You may not realize you pay it in this life, but you'll find out later that you paid it in the next. And worst of all, what if your children find out that you paid that price, that you sold out your integrity, and they learned that? What if they learn that you chose a lie instead of the truth? That price to pay is always going to be the higher price than the price you pay of suffering when you do the right thing and tell the truth.
I agree. I 100% agree with you, Rick. And that's really why I started my podcast. There wasn't an opportunity within my own community to talk about hard issues. They wouldn't open a window to really discuss the things that needed to be discussed. And so I said, all right, well, I've learned how to be a public affairs officer. I've learned how to do messaging. I can do it myself. And that's how the show got started, is that I just wanted to hear people's true and authentic stories. And yours is definitely one of those true and authentic stories. I so admire you, and I'm so glad that you agreed to come on the show and share your story, especially on such short notice. But after I watched that show with James, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a whole nother level of truth telling that I knew our military audience would benefit from, because there is a lot of things in the military, as I know you know, that we need to do to fix our house. And I'm going to continue to do these shows and to keep talking about them, because I do believe, like you said, that when we share the truth, we fix problems. When we
Well,
pretend like, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, thank you. It's very humbling to hear, such nice things. I hope we can live up to that. But I mean, I appreciate you having the courage to start your show in the face of everything that you've gone through and share everybody's stories, and including mine. But that, this is an active situation. Like, this is actively happening right now, and
Right.
there's a lot of good that can still happen. And so there's things that listeners can do. Like, you can contact the Department of Education, contact, Secretary McMahon. Like, so like I said, I met with her a couple of weeks ago, wonderful lady, committed to doing the right things, committing to ending DEI, but and committed to working closely. I've heard from both Harmeet Dhillon and her over the last few days. Like, Harmeet Dhillon, the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Justice, they work very closely together. They just got Northwestern University to settle for $75 million that they caught them doing problematic things on it, following Harvard and Columbia. But really the message is like, the people who put our administration presently into office, they're not at Harvard, they're not at Columbia, and they're not at Northwestern. They're at Everyday Joe University all over this country that now needs to be focused upon. And so, like, reach out to these people, let them know, take these cases up, take them to the end, and hold these institutions accountable. Contact Governor DeSantis, do a Freedom of Information request, see what else was said and who was at that meeting that they agreed to. Like, there are things that can be done, help us, support us on the Give, Send, Go, but like, let them know that we're paying attention, and do it in a nice way, like do it in a respectful way, and ask for them to take this on and see it through to the very end, because we have a lot of momentum and we're doing great. We just came back from Mar-a-Lago and meeting with the Secretary of Education on a direct, conversation and meeting to take action, and together with a Office of Civil Rights. I mean, this is the time. This is not the time for wilting violets. This is the time to move forward, and to move forward with vigor and courage and truth, and to reach out and to join the team, help the effort, and to do it at the Pentagon. If you guys have a military group, we had a story come out in the Gateway Pundit through J.M. Phelps and Work with Stars, where we pointed out that this is a Trojan horse laundering this anti-American ideology back into the Pentagon. Florida Tech, for instance, they train Space Force Guardians on DoD facilities using DoD money.
Honestly,
they can ask the Pentagon, why are we violating the presidential executive order by sending funds to an institution that's actively skirting it, undermining it, and subterfuging it?
But I think also the problem, and this is one of the reasons why I really love the first hour of our show, and I know that we've got to wrap this up in a little bit, but I want to just mention this, is the fact that we spent a good half hour, 40 minutes just unpacking why DEI is bad. And the problem that I see with the DOW, and I'm looking at Pete Hegseth and the staff there, is that they have not done a good job of educating on the backstory of DEI. And they've not done a good job of holding seminars where people can openly talk about why DEI is harmful, and they can actually help educate people on this issue. That's the problem. They put a lot of time in some really very poor extremism training that was awful, and that I got and said, this is terrible. I'm just going to bring in my own hate crimes expert and some guy from NCIS and actually teach the class. But they won't spend the time to really unpack what's wrong with DEI. So that's something I would love to see the DOD or DOW do going forward, is actually teach people that it's not just about diversity, because people have the same impression of DEI that I told you I used to have, where it's inclusive, it's great, why not? It's making sure that no one's discriminated against. But what they don't understand is that it does exact opposite of that. And so I think that that's something that the military needs to also examine as they move forward, because they've got a lot of people right now on the inside who are what I think are malicious compliers, who are
yeah.
working actively against the administration and usurping any of the initiatives that they would have to try to right the ship, so to speak. I mean, when you've got congressmen,
that's basically exactly what I caught on tape is people maliciously, literally lying to comply. And so, and that's my message back. That was my message literally back to Secretary Hegseth with that Gateway Pundit article about that, which is that when you're giving your funds through DARPA or research or ROTC or GI Bill or anything to these universities, but to corporations like Lockheed or Boeing or any of them, there is no accountability. All they do is ask them to self-certify that they are complying. And I blew the whistle. I blew the video out that behind those closed doors, they were literally laughing at the prospect that they're doing it anyways. And they know they're not going to get caught. So they have to, the leaders have to know that they're being lied to. They're not being complied with. And there has to be other mechanisms of accountability. I said, set up a tiger team. I'll lead it up. We'll be a DEI board. Because we have to have people to buy in understanding that, you know, what DEI is manifested as is actual discrimination. It's actually a policy that has the manifestation of discriminating, which is not good. We want to protect people from discrimination. We want to absolutely make sure it doesn't happen. We want to protect people's rights and respect people's rights and of all people. And that should be the gold standard. But it is a discriminatory thing that is why it's, you know, being dispensed with. And you can capture some people who may not have that understanding, but may be able to come to it, like you said you did, through a little bit of outreach and education. But there will be the cohort of burrowers and malicious non-compliers, and that has to be dealt with quickly and forcefully, because that's exactly what we caught. I proved it. This is not a theory. We literally caught it on tape, and you can roll the tape, show it to them. I mean, that's exactly what they said.
I mean, that's what's so amazing about your story. That was another reason I just wanted to do this story, was because it's the most blatant and obvious example of this issue. And I thought it would be the perfect way for me to introduce this topic to my audience. But I'm not going to stop talking about it. I showed you those books that I ordered off of a STARS webinar that I attended. So I'd like to hopefully, once I read them, maybe get the author of those books on the show. And I will continue to do what I can and do my part to educate on this issue and to fight back against it, because it is un-American and it is driving us apart. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I know this was another long Stories of Service podcast. I've had 3 2-hour shows this week, but sometimes I believe that's what's needed to really dive deep into these topics. Before I go, do you have any other parting words for the audience, Rick?
Well, I just thank everyone for their interest and attention. I humbly ask to, if they can, muster anything to throw into the Give, Send, Go. It certainly helps us and our family to sustain and survive, if in the prayers as well. But thank you guys. I hope to inspire for truth and also, connect, say hi. Like, I'm out here, connect with us. I'm on Twitter or X at Rick Adante, and the Give, Send, Go is called The Truth Is Not For Sale, and that's linked to in my Twitter bio. But I'm very grateful to James. Everybody asks how he is. He's just like you see him. He's an earnestly good person. He helped us. He did that wonderful event at Mar-a-Lago that connected us with the Secretary of Education, and now we have some really good momentum. So join the team, help support us on the Give, Send, Go, and I know you said you wanted to start on the video. Maybe end on the video gives them something to go out on it, because there's some pretty good little clips in there of them saying some pretty incriminating things.
Oh, absolutely. Let's go back and let's visit a little bit more of that video as we close out the call. So this was a little bit of what we saw, and it's the proof. It's the receipts. So can you see it?
Oh yeah.
All right, here we go.
by telling people we need to do this privately. That's also interesting. He knows it's wrong. Aligned with Governor DeSantis' directives and is taking all the necessary steps to demonstrate compliance. You underlined that because it's false. It is false. Tell us why it's false.
Because you're just demonstrating something. You're not doing something. Magicians demonstrate things. They demonstrate a card disappearing or a card showing up. That's magic because it's not true. It's an illusion. It's a facade, and that's what's happening on campus and at many campuses. We've seen this in the news in lots of places. They're not doing the things. I was there. I was a witness in that meeting and many others where people describe their efforts to continue doing the things that they don't want to be caught doing, and integrating these discriminatory teachings of DEI. As a participant and a witness in that meeting, he was recruiting us as willing participants, most of the room, in that effort to be non-compliant. And it was many co-conspirators in that scheme and plot that we were first told about.
Interesting.
In the month beforehand. We were emailed those minutes out the night beforehand. He came here and told us the same thing. So there's intentionality to deceive and defraud, and with many others as co-conspirators.
This is a cover-up. This is a cover-up. So
when we say we need this instruction that we can continue teaching our DEI, we need that to come from the president's office. Write it down. Send it to us. Give us some cover so we don't lose our grant funding. So we don't lose, so we don't get in trouble. And we said that directive needs to come from the president. If we're going to if they're being telling us to fly under the radar, verbally, orally, we said, well, can you write that down? And they said, no, we won't do that because it could be used as future evidence. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, evidence of what?
Yeah.
A conspiracy to fraud?
This is a cover-up. This is a cover-up. So thank you for pointing that out. These are from the meeting minutes.
How do we do a workaround?
How do we do a workaround on the research project? That's a smoking gun right there.
And
not true. It's not true.
People are just looking for words. They're simply, searching. Whatever comes up on the website, sometimes not even reading it, right?
President Trump has been so decisive about is making sure that DEI is stripped out of contracts.
So I had a $7 million ask. Talked about the project, went really well. Literally sat at his desk, turned two strings around and said, why are you so woke? $7 million. It's a lot of money, but if I lose $7 million, we could drag back thinking about this. Why don't we fight back? There's a lot to lose. That really does put a target on our back. That could be problematic. So I think the way I put it to the diversity cabinet was, we're going to do what we do. Let's not unnecessarily put a target on our back. We have a course, and it was called DEI 101, right? We have a course. Wow, Florida Tech teaches DEI 101, because that's no longer, that course would not be a public university curriculum anymore. Am I saying remove the course? Absolutely not. It was probably a very valuable course. Diversity is important for a number of reasons. I said, are you saying critical race theory? He said, yeah, how do you feel about that? I said, well, I believe in teaching all of history. The good, the bad, the ugly, and publicize all the notes so that anybody can access them. I thought we would not. So I think being mindful of how you're teaching the course and sharing information.
I just want to make sure I'm hearing the best recommendations. We have a human sexuality class. We have culture in, what's the name of the class?
Social cultural.
Social cultural.
Multicultural psychotherapy.
DEI, and because that course catalog is public, it might be wise for us to request an exemption to get it changed past the catalog publication date.
I would support that.
Maybe they're not going to be fired because of those.
They're not fired for teaching those.
But when it comes,
we're not done, obviously. But far back, that could be problematic. So.
Well, I was pleased to hear in the segment just before I joined that DEI has really been stripped from so many of the programs that you have here in Florida in schools.
Why don't we fight that? I think this is a valuable part of education. And if we have to change some words so they're not being scraped and so we're not targeted, it allows us to do our work.
And we're going to focus on DEI. Let's don't teach indoctrination.
You just wanted to speak the truth. You just wanted to get the truth out there. And you objected to the lies. All of it is a big lie, it seems. Rick says there are certain times that we are all called. He has now been fired recently from Florida Tech for coming forward with video evidence showing what appears to be an alleged fraud and cover-up. They offered you $100,000 to shut up and you didn't take it.
Yeah, we felt.
Wow. 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 And wow. That's just blows my mind. Blows my mind, Rick. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm disgusted. I'm at a loss when you could get something like that so clearly on tape. And
they're not bright. They're not very smart people.
And I mean, the people that are sitting in that meeting and are they still continuing to teach these courses, by the way? Is this still, like, as far as you know, like it's still happening? They're just.
Well, I'm fired. So
you have no idea. Yeah.
No, I do have an idea because I know what the president said on tape. And he said to keep teaching them to change the names. And she literally said, she listed rattle off a list of classes, including a class called DEI.
Right.
Which they taught. And they said, should we change them even though it's past the deadline to change them for the public? It's already listed.
For the catalog. Yeah.
That means a student is using federal financial aid or the GI Bill to enroll in a class that's actually not the thing that it actually is. That's a different kind of false advertising and fraud in its own right. So it's not that I have no idea. I have a very good idea. I was there and I watched them.
They're like laughing about it. And that's because honestly, they've normalized. They're normalizing fraud. And once it's normalized, that's just so dangerous. It just goes into so many other ethical and moral issues. But well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I will meet you backstage to say goodbye. I'm going to go full screen and we're going to be following your journey closely and updating our audience along the way of what happens.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for sticking with us. If you stuck with me this long, thank you so much for the show. Next week, I will have at least 2 shows in the works. Can't wait to bring you those promos. And as I always end these calls, please take care of yourselves. Please take care of each other. Go on Rick's Give, Send, Go page and donate or support the cause. Write the governor of Florida. Do what you can and be a part of the solution. All right, guys. Take care now. Bye-bye.